I kept to the road, and the road kept to me. That was the bargain. Hard country teaches simple math. Coins in the poke. Miles behind, miles ahead. No debts you can't carry in the dark. Folks call me Harlan Pike, and if they knew more than that, it was by accident or loose talk. I rode a dun mare with a good shoulder and a dun temper. My rifle roll scabbarded tight, and my bedroll smelled of mesquite smoke and last week's rain. The first of it started outside Calico Ridge, where the cottonwoods thin into gray flats and the wind slides like a knife under your collar. I was trailing a man who wouldn't stop running even when no one gave chase. "Name on the circular," said Jude Carver, "but paper names are paper." He'd left prints like a man in a hurry, heels digging, one boot half worn at the outer edge. Men who favor the outside of their right boot tend to cant their shots left. That's the sort of thing you file away. I found him near sundown, tucked into a shallow wash with the sky the color of old tin. He'd built a bad fire, green twigs and too much smoke. I sat my mare on the lip of the wash and said nothing a while, just watched him try to coax flame and cough out his lungs. When he finally looked up, we saw each other honest. He went soft around the mouth, the way men do when their legs have already decided for them. "Evening," I said. He took one look at the rifle and another at the mare. He raised both hands, palms empty, like he was warming them at church. "Don't shoot, mister. Ain't worth the cartridge." "Most men ain't. Tie your hands with that picket rope." "Slow." He obeyed. The rope looked like it had kept better company with stubborn mules than with his kind of luck. I climbed down easy, took his coat, checked the chambers by feel. 2 cartridges. No star on the base. Cheap rounds, likely to squib. He had a knife tucked in the boot with the worn edge. I took that too. "What's the price?" he asked, eyes on the dirt. Folks always ask second, after the gun is taken and before the walk. $40, Yavapai County. More if you were wanted across the line, but you're not. He swallowed. I could hear it in the windless wash. "You Harlan Pike?" "Yes," I said. Names don't hide long in small countries. Walk. We left the bad fire to die on its own mistakes. The wash gave us up to the flats, where the wind went to work on a man's ears. He stumbled once, and I gripped his elbow without meaning kindness, just keeping him upright so night wouldn't find me pitching a blind camp with a prisoner. He thanked me anyway. Habit, maybe. We reached Calico Ridge after dark. Lanterns made islands of yellow on the main street, and the telegraph office ticked to itself like a cricket with a secret. The deputy on night duty was a boy with freckles who'd been shaving a month and pretending 3. I handed him Jude Carver with the rope still on and the Colt wrapped in my bandana. "Sheriff Dawson?" I asked. "Home," the boy said, surprised that his voice worked. "He'll be back at sunup. You can bunk at Mrs. Bell's if you ain't particular." "I ain't," I said, counting. "Lock him up, and don't let him talk you into anything." Jude looked at me like men do when all their gambles have been counted. "Pike," he said quiet, "there's morning." I cut in, advice given to myself. "You'll have it in the morning." The boy led him away with a key larger than his wrist bone. I took my mare to the livery and rubbed her down myself because animals remember the difference. She snorted at the straw, and I gave her the good corner. The stableman, an old thin man named Quist, nodded at me around a plug of tobacco. "You look like the road spit you out," he said. "It did," I said. "It'll take me back up after breakfast. Storm maybe tomorrow," he said, as if the sky consulted him. "You want your saddle oiled while you sleep? Do it," I said, put 2 dimes in his palm, and watched as he weighed them against the work and found the world fair enough. Mrs. Bell's place was 3 doors down from the blacksmith's, whitewashed to within an inch of its life, lace at the windows like someone had taken worry and turned it into trim. She gave me a room that smelled of carbolic and starch and the memory of lilacs, which is to say it smelled like someone who put up a fight against dust. I washed at the basin until the water went gray and slept with my boots near enough to reach without thinking. Dawn took its time but got there. I woke the way men do who value hours over dreams. The mirror showed a face cut by places, hair needing a comb it wasn't going to get. I shaved by lamplight, the scrape steady, the sound like a small, orderly river. My scar on the jaw caught the light and looked newer than it was. Scars are vain like that. Sheriff Wayland Doss met me at his office door with a cup of coffee and eyes that had learned patience the slow way. He was a broad man, with a kind face that he didn't waste. We traded more cases than stories, and it suited us both. You got him in one piece, he said, nodding to the cell where Jude sat on the bunk, hands folded like a schoolboy praying for arithmetic to pass by. He came quiet. I said, your deputy kept him that way. Doss slid me the ledger, the ink standing high on the page where yesterday's hand hadn't fully dried. I wrote my name the way I always had, big enough to be seen, small enough not to be remembered. He counted out the money from a tin with a little blue flourish painted on the lid. His wife's doing. 40, he said. Less 5 for the county. Call it goodwill. I don't buy goodwill, I said, but I took the 35 without thought, like taking a good drink in heat. Jude stood when I turned to leave. Pike, he said again. I looked, because men have reasons even when they don't have hope. He worked his mouth like he was untying a knot. I left something with the laundress, he said. Name's Mrs. Huerta. She'll give it to you. This ain't a trick. Nothing you have belongs to me, I said. He shook his head, hair falling in his eyes, boyish for a breath. It's something I ain't fit to carry, he said, but I reckon you are. I don't argue when men hand me their shame. It sticks whether you catch it or not. I nodded once and stepped into the day. The day was dust and sun and a breeze smelling of old river. I went to the Chinese laundry first out of pure curiosity, which wears a hat called prudence in my trade. The old sign still said Chinese laundry in faded red, but Mrs. Huerta had bought the place when fever took the former owner. The bell over the door made a sound like a small bird hitting a window. The room was steam and starch, and a great wooden table where shirts lay in ranks like white fields under a thaw. Mrs. Huerta was not Chinese. She was a widow from Sonora who had bought the place when its owner took a fever and left behind only irons and debts. Her wrists were corded strong, and her hair was graying at the edges like a map burning inward. Senor Pike, she said without surprise. People talk in small towns. Names right ahead of you. He said you would come. I came. I said, he is still breathing, if that matters. She looked past me, through me, to a place I couldn't see. It matters, she said in a voice for herself. Then she wiped her hands on her apron, went to a back room, and returned with a bundle the size of a shoebox, wrapped in a faded calico apron printed with blue sprigs. She laid it in my hands. The bundle moved. Not much, just a shifting sea of breath inside linen. Then a smell came up, warm milk and soap and the honest work of a tiny stomach. I pulled back the edge with 2 fingers like it might bite. She was small as 2 fists laid side by side, face wrinkled as a winter pup, eyes shut hard against this bright, busy world. A scrap of ribbon was tied at one wrist, pink once, now gone to some in-between. She made a sound like someone trying not to cry. No, I said before my head caught up. No, Mrs. Huerta watched me like a teacher watches a fool. He paid for 3 days, Milk, she said a name to me, said your name, said you would understand obligation. I understand posters, I said. I could feel the heat from her like a stove door open. I don't carry babies. Then you better set her down careful, she said, and I learned something about how pride and mercy share a house. Because you ain't setting her down here. We stood like that. Steam hissed as if to break the silence. Outside, a wagon went by with iron rims singing the road to themselves. The baby hiccuped, and I made a sound only the air heard. What's her name? I asked, because a person needs a handle. Her mother called her Ruth, she said. At least that's what I heard when the woman came for washing and left a bottle by mistake and cried over a shirt. The man, your man, He came later with coins and it looked like a dog that's learned to bite at its own shadow. I told him I wouldn't keep a child for him, not past 3 days, not without a name and a plan. He put your name down like it was a plan. I don't keep a child for any man, I said, who had spent 20 years keeping men from their worst ideas with rope and iron. She put a tin cup in my free hand. You can keep coffee for yourself, she said. Drink it, then say what you mean. I drank. It was bitter enough to make sense of life. The baby shifted again, seeking heat that was already there. I set the cup down and made for the door, bundle and all, because sometimes the only way to win is to leave the room where you're losing. The street had filled while we argued. A peddler shouted the gospel of tinware. A woman swept her stoop with a care that said she had few things she could fix, and would fix them twice. I stood there with $35 in my pocket and the smallest weight I'd ever carried in my arms. Where's the church? I asked the boy with a slate under his arm. He pointed with his chin the way boys do when they don't want to be caught caring, and I went. Reverend Ames had one of those faces that looks surprised to find itself in charge of a body. He listened without interruption until I ran out of words I wanted to use. We can take her, he said, looking around the sanctuary like answers might be tucked between psalms. For a day, maybe 2. Mrs. Ellery has milk, but her own is near drying up and her boy's a kicker. There'll be an orphan train through Prescott next month. We could hold her till then. A month was a canyon. I was a man built for narrow arroyos, quick crossings. I can't, I said. I'm headed north. As a rider through Chino Valley owes the county a debt, and another in Ash Fork who doesn't know it yet. Debts, he said, like trying on a familiar coat and finding it no warmer. He looked down at the baby as if she might tell him what to do. She looks healthy. She looks small, I said. That's different. He nodded at that truth. Leave her here for today, he said. We'll ask around for a wet nurse and something like a plan. You can think on whether you're the kind of man whose name gets written on a ribbon by Providence or by a scoundrel. I know which, I said, and I did. But the church smelled of beeswax and wood that had held rain, and something about the smell made a man's answers sit gentler in his mouth. I laid her down in a drawer they brought from the vestry and filled with folded shawls. She made one soft complaint, and then sank into sleep like the poor and the honest do, quick and entire. I left before I changed my mind about anything that would cost me money. Work steadies a man. I went to the telegraph and wired ahead on the 2 riders with my notes about their boots and their habits. I checked my rig at the livery, ran my hands along cinch and billet like a blind man reading a good book. Quist had oiled the saddle true. The mare leaned into my palm with her muzzle, then pretended she hadn't. Storm smell hung faint, and the horizon wore a line of wool. I figured I had 2 clear days at best. By noon, word had learned its legs. Folks who didn't have business with me found it. Mrs. Bell clucked and brought a knitted cap without saying why. A gambler named Finch, who owed me a favor for not turning his cheating into a lesson last winter, said he could get me a price on a cradle if I was intent on ruining my trade. I told him to keep his favor. He grinned like a man relieved to still have it. I ate stew at the boarding house table with my hat on the peg and my back to a wall that had survived 3 winters. The meat tasted of pepper and the vegetables of effort. Men talked around me the way men talk around a coal stove, careful not to say anything that might start something. I left my bowl clean and took my boots back to the street to the church to see if my problem had decided to walk away. It had not. Reverend Ames looked up when I answered with a face that would have made a good weather vane for bad news. We found no nurse who can take her, he said. Mrs. Ellery's boy fussed himself purple, and she says her house is already a thunderhead. The widow Carr says she'll pray, which is what she says when she is saying no. The train is still a month. What about the sheriff? I asked, petty as a boy whose marble rolled under a porch. Law sometimes takes what no one will. The law takes bodies and disputes, he said. It don't take babies, not unless they're evidence of something worse. He looked tired in a way that wasn't sleep. I'll keep her tonight if I must, but I ain't the man to hear that cry at 3 turns after midnight. You are riding out, you said. I said a lot. I answered. The drawer bed held the baby like a secret. She had worked one fist free of the shawl, and it rested on her cheek like she'd put herself under arrest. I looked at that fist too long. We could pass a hat, he offered. Pay a woman for a week or 2. Hats don't solve months, I said. Ah, Pike. Mrs. Warehill's voice came from the doorway, stern as a judge who liked you. She held a bottle wrapped in cloth and a small bundle of folded diapers, clean as new snow. You'll take these, she said. 3 days is what he paid me for. I'll give you 3 days in kind. I'm on the road, I said. You'll be on it better with this, she said, thrusting the bottle into my hand. Warm it at your fire. Don't scorch the milk. If she won't take it, be patient. Don't shake her like a coal lamp. She's not a lamp. I don't. You do now, she said, and something in me knew the truth of that the way a horse knows the gate is open. I took the bundle and the bottle and my own words back. The Reverend watched a moment, then did what I suppose is his trade. He blessed without fuss. God keep you, he said, and her. Come Sunday if you're through. I don't keep Sundays, I said out of habit. Then keep your word, he said, and his smile was small and aimed at himself for saying it. I made it as far as the boarding house before the baby announced her opinions about drawers and sanctuaries and men with rifles. Mrs. Bell flew up the stairs with me, as if a fire had started in her parlor. Warm water, she commanded her own daughter, who had been pretending not to listen and now had purpose. They brought a kettle and a porcelain bowl with blue flowers that had seen better towns. I held the bottle and the water until my wrist told me it was right. The baby told me I was still wrong. She cried like she had the lungs of a church bell. Here, Mrs. Bell said, taking the bundle like a general takes a map. She set the baby into the crook of my arm, pressed the bottle to a mouth that would not be instructed, and hummed something minor, key and old. The baby latched like a starving guest on a polite biscuit. That's all, I said, feeling stupid as a shovel leaning in a corner. That's all, she said. You ride with her. She'll sleep. Wrap her good and keep the wind off. She's simple as weather and twice as changeable. I'll find someone north, I said, lying to see how it felt in my mouth. You might, she said, which is how a woman lets you save face while she burns the map you were never going to follow. The road out of town put his hand on my back. I saddled the mare while Ruth, if that was truly her, finished her bottle and sighed like a tiny old man. I fixed a sling from a neckerchief and a strip of ticking Mrs. Bell tore from a pillowcase with royal ceremony. The baby rode against my chest like a warm canteen you don't dare spill. The mare flicked an ear at the new sound of small breaths. Quist watched from the stall door, arms folded, tobacco gone. Never took you for a man to carry a charm, he said, not unkind. It ain't that, I said. Sure, he said, because old men are polite when they know things you don't. We rode. The wind had turned, and a bank of weather like tarnished silver rode the western edge. The road north to Chino Valley runs through low brush, and the kind of arroyos that look shallow until they aren't. I kept to the high side. The baby slept until she didn't, and when she woke, I learned to stop and warm the bottle on a small fire of dried twigs that smoked little and answer quick. The mare stood hip-shot and patient, as if we'd always fed someone so small between miles. At a fork where someone had nailed a board to a post pretending to be a sign, I met luck in the plain clothes it favors. A rider came down too fast, 2 saddlebags bouncing like he owed them money. He looked up, saw my rifle where it belonged, saw the sling across my chest, and made a choice that kept his day simple. He reined in. You know a man named Everett Klein, he asked. I do, I said. Everett was one of my 2 northerly debts. He just busted a cinch on the ridge and took a tumble, the rider said. Ain't dead, might wish it. If you want him alive for whatever reason, you best go now, before his friends get ideas about mercy. I touched the brim of my hat. The baby's small weight anchored me like a hand on my shirt. I was going that way, I said, and we were. Behind us, Calico Ridge got small and reasonable. Ahead, the sky opened into trouble and invitation. I don't believe in omens. I do believe in weather, and the way a tiny hand can lay on your chest and make the air feel different. I meant to find Everett Klein, hand off the child to someone with a kitchen and a heart, collect what was due, and keep to my rule. That was the plan the road and I had agreed to at breakfast. Plans are like tin cups. They work until they don't, and then you drink from your hands. We rode on, the mare steady, the bottle cooling in a pocket, the ribbon on Ruth's wrist catching what little light the weather left. Somewhere a raven sang his one hard note and went about his day. I set my jaw against the wind and told myself 3 days could be counted easy. The wind didn't argue. I caught up with Everett Klein halfway between Chino Valley and the Ridge Road where mesquite turns to cedar. The storm had caught him first. Rain moved sideways in sheets, hard enough to skin a man if he stood proud to it. The mare hated thunder, but she trusted my weight and the baby's small warmth tied against me. Everett's horse was down in the ditch, one leg bent wrong, saddle half buried in clay. He himself crawled uphill like a man trying to climb out of his own mistake. "Don't shoot," he called before he saw who I was. "I don't shoot cripples," I said. He blinked rain and fear. "You Pike?" Last I checked, he slumped back, the fight spilling out. "Guess that's that." The wind shifted. Somewhere behind us, lightning split a pine, the smell of resin sharp enough to taste. I tied the mare to a juniper stump and checked the baby. Still sleeping, miracle or indifference, I couldn't say. I wrapped her tighter in the oilcloth and went down for Everett. He'd busted a rib or two. You can hear it in the breath, a wet click like a boot in mud. "You got a choice," I said. "Walk with me or I drag you." He managed 3 steps and folded. I slung him over the mare's rump, the baby against my chest, the sky cracking like judgment. We made for a line of cottonwoods where an arroyo promised less wind and more sense. I built a lean fire under a shelf of rock, flame no taller than my hand. The smoke rolled along the ground instead of up, a good sign. Everett groaned but didn't run. Pain keeps men honest. The baby stirred, opened her mouth, and let out a cry that cut through the storm like a bell through fog. "Lord," Everett whispered, "you travel with that?" Apparently. He watched me feed her with a look that mixed pity and amusement. "Never figured you for family." Neither did I. When she finished, I tucked the bottle away and wiped her chin with the corner of my sleeve. The storm backed off to a drizzle, soft drumming on leaves. Everett shifted, wincing. "You'll take me in?" "Alive pays more." He nodded, eyes closing. "Then we're partners till the county line." He slept. I stayed up, feeding the fire with twigs no thicker than pencils. The baby's breathing matched the rain, slow and deliberate. Every few minutes she'd twitch, then settle, as if dreaming of a quieter world. I'd hunted men for 20 years and never known silence to feel so loud. When dawn came, the world steamed. I rigged a travoy from saplings and my spare blanket, tied Everett down like freight, and set the mare north. Ruth. Yes, I'd started saying her name in my head, rode against me, lighter than guilt, heavier than air. We made Prescott by sundown. Sheriff Lowe took Everett off my hands and paid the bounty in cash and doubt. "You look tired," he said. "Work'll do that." He eyed the bundle. "That what I think?" "No," I said. "It's worse." He laughed, but didn't ask. Men out here know when not to. I took a room above a feed store. The keeper, a widow named Clara Marin, charged by the week and talked by the minute. She peeked at the baby and softened like butter on a stove. "Lord above," she said, "you feeding her yourself?" "I ain't that talented." "Well," she said, "you will be by Wednesday." She was right. By Wednesday I could warm a bottle, burp the child, and change a cloth without thinking. My hands, trained for knots and triggers, found new trade in buttons and pins. Rifles get cleaned, babies get held. I learned the order. Ruth rewarded me with sleep, and occasional smiles that felt like credit extended to a risky customer. On Thursday, luck changed shape again. A man named Torin came into town looking for Everett's trail partner. Claimed he'd been double-crossed on a mining stake. He was lean, long-jawed, the kind who could chew on resentment for years without losing flavor. He saw me tying Ruth's sling before a trip to the post office and squinted. "You, Pike?" "Most days." "Heard you caught Everett, that right?" "Depends who's asking." "Friend," he said, which usually means trouble. "I aim to cut in on that reward. You owe me a share." "Then collect from the sheriff. He's honest if you meet him early in the day." Torin's eyes slid to the sling. "That a baby?" "Looks that way." He spat in the dust, a thin line of brown. "Never figured a bounty man for charity. Never figured a thief for manners." We looked at each other a long moment. Then he grinned the kind of grin men wear when they've decided to be stupid later. "See you around, Pike." He did, twice more that week. Once at the saloon, once outside my lodging. I kept my back straight and my pistol where I could find it without fuss. But luck, as it turned out, had already chosen its camp. That night, Ruth started coughing. Small, dry sounds that made my gut go tight. Clara brewed onion syrup and scolded me for drafts I hadn't caused. I sat up holding the child till first light, whispering nonsense and stories I didn't remember knowing. She settled at last, sweat cooling her hair in curls against my shirt. When morning came, I opened the door for air and found Torin on the porch, slumped in a chair, a bullet through his shoulder. His horse was gone. Someone had seen fit to settle an old score before dawn. "Pike," he rasped, "ain't you the lucky one?" I checked the wound, through and through, messy but merciful. "You'll live," I said. "Figured as much," he muttered, then looked at Ruth. "She's your charm, huh? You keep her close. Men shoot wide around. Good luck." He passed out before I could answer. Clara fetched the doctor. By noon, Torin was patched and gone under guard. Sheriff Lowe told me the bullet had the mark of a revolver used by Everett's old gang, meaning they'd followed their partner's scent straight to town and missed their mark. "You best move on," he said. "They might not miss twice." I looked at Ruth, then at the gray strip of road running north. "Maybe," I said. That evening, I paid Clara for the week I wouldn't stay and bought supplies. Milk powder, small cloths, new oil for the rifle. She kissed Ruth's forehead and told me, "Some folks get born carrying light. Maybe she's one." We left Prescott under a copper sky. The mare's hooves beat a steady song. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone between towns. At a creek crossing, we stopped for water. Ruth watched sunlight ripple on the surface, her tiny hand opening and closing like she could grab it. I laughed, which startled both of us. "Guess we drink, little one," I said. "Storm behind, miles ahead." She gurgled her approval. If a man believes in signs, that would have been one. The next town was Dry Wells. Name fit. No well had held water there since a quake shifted the ground years back. The folks who remained were too stubborn or too poor to leave. I found lodging at a trading post where the innkeeper eyed the baby inside as if life kept adding verses to a song she didn't like. "You'll find no nurse here," she warned. "Just a bed and quiet," I said. "Quiet costs extra." I paid it. Night fell hard. Wind carried sand that sang against the shutters. I set Ruth's basket near the bed and cleaned my coat by lamplight. The smell of oil and dust felt honest. Somewhere outside, boots scraped, then paused. I blew out the lamp. A knock came. Two short, one long. Not the pattern of a friend. "Pike," a voice hissed. "We want what's yours." I kept still, thumb on the hammer. "You want the baby? You're already dead," I said through the dark. A laugh answered. "Not the brat. The money from Everett." Figures moved past the window, shadows against thinner shadow. I waited till one shoulder crossed the doorframe, then fired once. The man dropped like rain off a roof. The rest scattered, shooting wild. Plaster dust fell like snow. When the silence came back, It came clean. If you're riding along with me tonight, take a swallow of water and roll your shoulders once. The trail sits easier that way. I checked Ruth, still asleep, hands curled. I sat by till dawn, counting my breaths, thinking maybe Torrin hadn't been wrong about luck, only about whose side it favored. At first light, I buried the man I'd shot in a wash behind the post. I left his pockets turned out for the coyotes. Dry wells didn't ask questions. Towns like that had learned thrift with curiosity. I tamped the last spadeful and let the wash take his name. We rode west by midday. The land flattened into sage and low hills that folded like worn cloth. Clouds broke, sunlight spilling gold across the distance. Ruth stirred, blinked, and smiled. No reason, just practice for better days. I found myself talking to her without knowing why. I told her about the Pecos River and the smell of rain on hot stone, about the time I rode for 3 days with a busted arm because a man needed bringing back alive. She listened like she understood debt. We camped near a cluster of cottonwoods, their leaves whispering secrets about wind. The fire was small but bright. I fed her, then leaned back watching stars prick holes in the dark. You and me, I said. 3 days came and went. Guess we'll see about 4. The mare sighed, the baby slept, and the night held still long enough for a man to believe he could start over. We made it near Flagstaff before the nights turned cold enough that breath smoked at dawn. Pines took the place of mesquite, and the ground gave off that sweet, dark smell of needles and damp bark. The world had gone from dust to hush. I liked it better quiet. Ruth had grown heavier by ounces that felt like pounds on a long climb. Her eyes had learned to stay open longer, gray-blue like mountain rain before it falls. She'd taken to reaching for my beard when I fed her, a habit that made the work near impossible, and the moment worth it anyway. A trapper's cabin stood off the road. No smoke, door swinging. I called out twice before stepping in. Whoever had built it left with haste, pots still on hooks, a cot made but dusty. The place would do for a spell. I set down my gear, made a small fire, and let the mare crop grass by the creek. That evening I took inventory. 1/2 pound of beans, 2 tins of milk, a flask of whiskey, and the company of a baby who had no notion of what any of that meant. She cooed at the fire, at the sparks climbing like tiny prayers. I found myself telling her how men once hunted buffalo here, how the herds moved like weather, how I'd never seen them but my father had. My father. The name sounded strange after so long unused. He died with a debt and a promise unkept. Maybe that's what I'd been chasing all along, collecting other men's promises to make up for my own. I looked down at Ruth and wondered if that counted as luck or a punishment. A rider came 2 days later. I heard him before I saw him, the rhythm of hooves not made for travel but for pursuit. I doused the fire, slid the rifle close, and waited. When he topped the ridge, I recognized the color of his coat before the face. County issue. Sheriff's man. Pike, he called, spotted me by the cabin. Message from Yavapai. They're saying that Carver fellow you turned in died in the jail. Fever took him. Sheriff sent word. Seems there's property of his to settle. Something about inheritance papers. Carver had nothing, I said. The deputy shrugged. Paper says otherwise. Left a note with your name on it. Witnessed proper. Your listed guardian to an infant. Ruth Carver. County clerk says you can turn her over to the orphan line or sign acceptance yourself. I stared at the deputy, then at the child playing with her own fingers like she discovered miracles. When's the train? End of the month. Prescott again. He looked like he wanted to ask what kind of bounty man traveled with a baby, but thought better of it. You'll sign one way or another, he said, touching his hat. Clerk won't wait past the schedule. He rode off, leaving dust and decisions. I sat outside that night under stars that blinked through smoke-thin cloud. The fire threw enough light to make Ruth's face look carved from dawn itself. She gurgled when I brushed her hand with a fingertip. You've got your mother's name, I said softly, but not her trouble. And you got his eyes, maybe, though I'd wish you didn't. The wind shifted, carrying the far-off scent of snow. I thought about all the miles I'd walked, all the men I tied and dragged back breathing, and how none of it had left me with anything that breathed for joy. When morning came, I packed light, left the cabin swept, took only what we could carry. Flagstaff lay a day north, Prescott 3 days south. I figured to stop by the county office and hand over the bundle that Luck had loaned me. That was the smart plan. But the road, like Luck, doesn't care for smart plans. On the second day, as we crossed the Verde Flats, a thunderhead rose black and round as judgment. The mare shied, ears flat. Then I saw what she smelled. 3 riders cresting the hill behind us. Everett's gang again, or what was left of them. I kicked the mare forward, but open ground leaves no tricks to play. The baby woke, startled, crying against my chest. That sound put something fierce in me I hadn't felt since I was young and stupid. I turned off the road toward a dry wash, rained hard, and found cover behind a wall of stone. The riders came fast, rifles high, eyes greedy. I waited till the first passed the narrow cut, then fired once. His horse screamed, reared, and threw him into the brush. The second man broke left, cursing, and I caught his leg with the second shot. The third kept coming till I stood up in the wash, rifle steady, and he saw my eyes. He pulled back slow, weighing death in daylight. Then he spat, turned, and rode. The others crawled away or didn't. I didn't chase. Killing's work, not sport, and I was done with that trade for the day. When it was quiet again, I checked Ruth. She'd stopped crying, just looked up at me like I was another noise in a world full of them. Her calm hit me harder than fear had. We camped that night near a river bend where cottonwoods wore the wind like shawls. I cleaned the rifle, then stared at it too long. Every scratch on the metal told a story of debt, of pay due, and pay collected. I realized I didn't want her growing up hearing that kind of story. So when we reached Prescott, I walked straight to the courthouse. The clerk, a small man with ink on his cuffs, pushed papers across the desk. "You're the guardian of record, Mr. Pike. Sign here to release her to the orphan train, or here to accept full responsibility." He looked up. "You sure you understand what that means?" "I reckon I do." My hand hovered over the first line, then the second. Ruth squirmed in the crook of my arm, small fingers brushing my wrist. She made a sound like a question folded into a sigh. I signed the second line. The clerk nodded. "You'll need witnesses." "I'll find them," I said. Mrs. Huerta came from her laundry to do it, wiping starch from her hands. The Reverend came too, hat in hand, eyes bright. They signed without asking why. The pink ribbon had faded to in between. I retied it anyway. "Got a place to stay?" the Reverend asked. "Not yet. There's an old parsonage near the schoolhouse. Roof leaks, but it's dry on the inside if you're clever." "I can fix leaks," I said. "You can fix most things," he replied. I took the key. The parsonage was small. 2 rooms, 1 stove, 1 promise. I built a cot from cedar slats and canvas, and Ruth slept there her first night as mine. A week later, Sheriff Lowe stopped by, hat in hand. "Heard you turned down a bounty down south," he said. "That true?" "Maybe. Never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I." He grinned. "You'll make a poor farmer, Pike. But a good father, maybe." "Maybe." I said again. When he left, the house felt too quiet. I sat by the stove, watching the fire burn to coals. Ruth stirred, half awake. I reached in the crib and let her tiny hand close around my finger. "Guess the road's yours now," I said, "and I'll follow where it goes." The room smelled of cedar, smoke, and warm milk. Outside, rain started on the roof. Steady, patient, forgiving. The first spring came slow but sure, the way forgiveness does. Snow melted off the hills above Prescott, and the river learned to speak again. Every morning I carried Ruth to the porch so she could see what a world does when it wakes. Light crawling up fences, steam rising off wet soil, roosters late as always. Her ribbon caught the first light like a little flag that never asked for wind. She'd laugh at small things, a wagon creak, the cluck of hens, the wind flipping my hat brim. That sound could have bought peace for any man still owing some. Work found me again, though of a gentler kind. Folks learned that Harlan Pike could mend fences as steady as he once tied knots. The sheriff sent word of bounties, but I let them pass like dust clouds on another man's horizon. I'd made enough chasing the wrong kind of luck. Sometimes, when she slept, I'd sit by the window and listen to rain tap the roof and think how a man spends half his life trying not to care and the other half trying to learn how. She'd stir, and I'd hush her with a hand on her back, small as a breath. The road still called, low and patient. Maybe one day I'll answer, show her where the wide country begins and ends. But not yet. The mare's gone gray, the house stands quiet, and I've come to like the sound of that hush. If you're listening to this by lamplight, take a sip of water, ease your shoulders some. The world runs long, but nights like this are short and kind. Thank you for keeping me company out here. If you'd care for more stories of orphans and found family, they're waiting on the trail ahead.